Hey class, I'm going to show you how to do the projection mapping project. So let's just bring in our image, go to View, Image Plane, Import Image, navigate to where your image is. I'm going to be using this painting of an empty room, and I recommend it be empty because you'll see we're going to have some issues with the objects we want to place in our scene. So this is really good for creating environments and rooms more than objects themselves. So what I'm doing here is I'm positioning the camera to line up so that the ground plane matches the floor, and it's a little hard to see, but you can see the grid down here. And so the way I'm moving the camera is I'm holding Alt and I'm clicking and dragging the left mouse button, and that'll rotate. And if you click and drag the middle mouse button, that'll move the position, and clicking and dragging the right mouse button will zoom. So all while holding Alt, we're clicking the right, left, and middle mouse buttons. So once I'm happy with my position here, not quite yet, I'll line up this grid. So that's looking pretty good. It looks, yeah, that's looking good. So what we want to do is create the geometry that we're going to project this texture onto. So let's go to Create, Polygon Primitives, Cube. So this is just bringing a cube into our scene, and it already kind of looks like it's sitting in the room because our camera is placed correctly. If we move the camera, you can see how it gets off. And if you ever move the camera, you can just hit the back bracket on your keyboard to go back to the last camera position. So just so we don't accidentally do that, I'm going to lock this camera with this little camera lock button right here. And now I'm not able to move this camera anymore. I still want to be able to move around in my scene, so I'm going to make another camera. Create, Cameras, Camera. And I can look through that camera by going to Panels, Perspective, Camera 1. That's what we just made. So I'm looking through that camera right now, and I can move in orbit with Alt, left mouse, click and drag, middle mouse and right mouse, click and drag. And you can see that this image is locked to this camera. So when we were orbiting around, let me just show you. So if we go back to, well, here's what I want to do. If you hit spacebar, it'll show you 4 different views, and these are all different viewports. And we only need 2, so you can either drag this down or you can hit this button right here, which will give you 2 viewports. So we want to look through our perspective camera, and we want to look through our other camera that we made. So what I wanted to show you was, if I unlock my perspective camera, when I rotate this around, you'll see the camera rotates and the image rotates because it's locked. So let me just go undo that because I liked that position. And I'm even gonna change this a little bit more. Something else you can do is change the focal length of the camera. So I'm going to select the camera with this button here, go to my channel box on the right, and right here, focal length. I'm going to change this to 24, see if that helps it. No, it seems to have made it worse. Let's try going in a bit. I'm going to do a 50. And again, this is a 2D painting, so we can't expect it to be completely accurate, so there's going to have to be a little bit of guesswork involved. Overall, I'm pretty happy with that. So what I'm going to do is select my cube, and in my other viewport, I can now move it around and I can see it update here. So I want to make this cube to be the size of this whole room. So I'm going to scale it up. Way big. And now it's obstructing our view of the image. So you can hit this X-ray button right here to see through, to see behind. So we want to make the interior of this room, and right now we're looking at the exterior of the box. So I'm going to delete well, let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'll just delete this front face here. So now we're looking inside the cube. But you'll see it's black on the inside, and that's a common 3D thing, is what's called normals. 3D models have an inside and an outside. And so the outside is where we're seeing the gray, and the inside is where we're seeing the black. And that's just the direction that the normals are facing. Right now it's facing inward. So we want to actually flip this inside out because we don't want to see the outside. We don't care about that. We're going to be working on the inside of this cube. So if you go to Mesh Display, Reverse, this is going to reverse the normals. So now you'll see the outside of the cube is black and the inside is gray. And I actually don't even want to see this black outside. I just want to see straight into the room. So if I go to my attribute editor on the right, and I go to Render Stats, this is in the second tab here, I can turn off double-sided, and it won't show me the inside normals. So I'll be looking through, and I'll just be able to see the inside of the room, and that's what I want. So I'm going to move this cube up. I want the bottom of the cube to be at the bottom of the ground plane. And so I'm going to move this face down here up to the grid. So to select the face, I'm going to hold down the right mouse button and drag to face and release. Now I'm in face selection mode. So any face I click on, I now have the freedom to manipulate that. So I'm going to go to my move tool, that's hitting W, it's also right here. I'm going to move this up. And you can snap it to your grid by holding X. So I'm going to hold X and get it right there, that's perfect. Okay, now I'm going to do the side walls. And so I'm just going to bring these in, and I'm looking here now. I'm looking to see this corner right here. That's the corner I'm making right now. Boom, and then I'll make the right wall, and I'm hitting spacebar to jump into these viewports. So if I hit spacebar while my mouse is hovering over this viewport, it'll expand, and then if I press spacebar again, we'll go back into our 2 view. Now if I hover the mouse over here and hit spacebar, we'll jump into that view. So I can't see it from there, so I'll just squeeze it in. Now I'll jump in here, and we'll line it up. Again, I'm lining up this edge with the edge in the painting. So we're creating basic 3D geometry that matches. And this needs to come down a bit, so I'm going to bring this down. And you want to be careful manipulating in this view, because if you use this drag tool here, where you can drag both planes at once, what's going to happen is it's dragging it from the angle of your camera. So what might happen is, let's say you drag it, and you think you're just dragging it down, but it actually drags it forward in 3D space, and your cube might get messed up. So just keep looking at your 3D objects in this viewport to make sure everything's looking right and not distorted, because it might happen if you're working too much in this view. So this edge needs to come forward, and I'm just gonna, if I just bring that edge forward, it'll distort here. So I'm gonna bring all of these edges forward. And to get into edge mode, I'm holding the right mouse button down, dragging up to edge, releasing. And if I double click on one of the edges, it'll select this whole loop. So now I've got it all selected. I'm going to bring all this forward until we hit the edge of frame right there. And that's looking pretty good. So we have this edge lining up pretty well, but this one doesn't. And I think that's mostly because our camera is not the right focal length. So I can mess with that a little bit to try and get it perfect, but it's going to be tough because this is a 2D drawing, and it's not like we have the camera data of what focal length this was shot at. So instead, we'll just fudge it a little bit, and what did I do here? Let me go back to, I was at 50. There we go. It looks like I moved my perspective camera, so I just hit back bracket on the keyboard to or not undo, but to go to the previous camera position. So make sure to lock this camera so you don't accidentally move it around. All right, I'm gonna repeat what I did with the edges, double click here, and bring it forward. So like I was saying, our camera isn't perfect, so I'm just going to grab this edge and move it myself. And this is where you can get messed up, is if you just rotate it to look correct in this view, it's not going to be correct in the 3D view. So I recommend adjusting all your 3D models using this view. So I'm just going to bring this corner up, and I'm going to the vertex selection tool. Again, I'm holding down the right mouse button, dragging and releasing on vertex. And now I hit W for my move tool, and we'll just move this up a bit. So now I'm looking at this edge here, and that lines up nicely. I'm going to do the same with, actually, let me see. Maybe I should move it this way. That would make sense, right? Let me see what happens if I move this whole edge. I'm just going to play with this a little bit. I want to try and get the camera even more correct. And this doesn't have to be perfectly accurate, but the more accurate it is, the better it'll end up looking. So I'm pretty happy with this, the way this is all lined up. And so what I'm going to do is project this texture onto this cube. So the way to do that is we're going to create a material on this cube. So we're going to right click, hold, go down to assign favorite material, Lambert. Let's name this Lambert M underscore for material projection. And you can change the color of the material, you can change the transparency, lots of different settings. What we're going to do is add a file, so hit this checkered box. And we want to add this file, and that's right here, but you want to right click on it because we're going to add it as a projection because we're projecting it through the camera. So settings here, we want to change the projection type to perspective. We want to link it to the perspective camera. And fit fill, you want to change that to vertical. So last thing we got to do is actually load in the image into our projection. So over image, hit this box in here. And this is our file node where we'll load in our file, so hit the folder icon. Let's navigate to our image again, bring it in. And now it's in there, but we can't see it because we're not displaying textures in our viewport. So you can just hit 6. And now we'll turn on textures. It's also this button right here. This checkered circle is to turn on and off textures. So now we're looking at textures, and we're already off to a pretty good start. We can see we've got the back wall and the side walls, but you can see it's very distorted on the chair on the ground here. And this is correct. And this is what makes it difficult, is if you have an object like a chair in here, it's gonna get distorted, and like we want to put this chair in here, but as a 3D model, and we can project this texture onto a chair that we put here. For example, if I created a cube and I applied our texture to it, assigned existing material projection, and I moved it over. Let's say this is modeled like a chair, then our chair shows up in 3D space a little better. But this technique is really best for setting up the walls and everything, and you can see there's a lot of darkness happening when I'm looking through it, and we don't want that. That's just a 3D shading effect that Maya's viewport puts in. So in our material settings, so I'll select my cube, we'll go into the attribute editor, which is on the right here, and I'll go all the way over to our projection material. I'm going to crank the ambient color up all the way, and that'll remove all those shadows. And so now we can see this image a little better. And so already we can do a little bit of 3D movement around the room, which is pretty cool.